Hi, I'm Jasma. Let's make crispy egg roll biscuits for the Chinese New Year, also known as the Lunar New Year or Spring Festival. Now these egg rolls are not to be confused with the savory, typically deep-fried, spring roll-like egg roll. These are sweet, they're crunchy, it's flaky, and it has a wafer-like texture, and it's a snack that I grew up eating, and it's a staple around Chinese New Year. So here's how you can make them at home without any fancy equipment. If you are looking for more Chinese New Year foods to make, I have an entire dinner menu with over 10 different traditional Chinese recipes with some modern influences that you can try out this year. To get started, I'm gonna make the batter for the egg rolls. I have my 5 eggs here, which are at room temperature, and I'm weighing out the amount of egg I end up using in the recipe because eggs typically vary in size, and you want to achieve the same consistency each time. Add the sugar to the eggs, along with the milk powder for flavor, although it is optional, as well as some vanilla extract, and whisk until the sugar and milk powder has dissolved into the eggs. Then for the dry ingredients, combine the cornstarch, baking soda, and salt with the all-purpose flour, and we're going to sift this into the wet ingredients to avoid any lumps. With the dry ingredients in, I'm gonna add in the melted butter, which I melted in advance so it has a chance to cool, and just whisk until a smooth batter forms. And at this point, if you don't see any clumps forming in the batter, you can skip this next step, but I always like to pass everything through a sieve anyways, just to make sure that the final egg roll has the finest texture. The egg roll batter is ready, so now let's talk flavors. The flavor variations available to you in a Chinese supermarket is pretty limited, but since you make it yourself, you can play with it as much as you want. So I'm gonna give you 4 different flavor ideas. I have some desiccated coconut, ground black sesame seeds, basically just took roasted black sesame seeds and grinded it up in a food processor until it turns into a powder, some dried rose petals, and dried osmanthus flowers. I measured my batter and it weighs 400 grams total. It might vary a little bit for you, but given my measurements, I portioned the batter into 80 grams each since I wanted to make 5 different flavors, one being the plain version, and just mix the flavorings into the batter. Feel free to play with this however you want. You can use matcha powder, cocoa powder, different kinds of tea leaves, or even play with the colorings and make it kind of like a tie-dyed situation. The possibilities are really endless here. And if you need to, you can adjust the consistency of the batter by adding in a little bit of milk to thin it out. Now, if you have a crepe maker or a griddle, now is the time to whip that out. But if not, you can totally do this without any special equipment. So for the things you need, a shallow non-stick frying pan. You want to use one that has as much flat surface area as possible, a piece of parchment paper, and this is just pre-cut to fit the pan just so that it lays flat. And then you're gonna need something flat to press down the egg rolls with, and I'm using a 8-inch cake pan. Make sure you're not using one with a removable bottom. You'll also need a flat spatula. Get one as thin as possible. To shape the egg rolls, you can use a rolling pin, a dowel, chopsticks, or here I have the end of a spatula that is perfectly straight. Finally, to portion out the egg rolls, I'm using a mini ice cream scoop. This holds 1 tablespoon of batter. All right, to get started with the cooking, turn your heat to high just so that the pan can heat up. The key to making egg rolls successfully is to cook the batter really low and evenly so that it's still soft and malleable for shaping. So once this has heated up, I'm gonna turn it down to low heat. We're gonna start by laying on a little bit of batter into the center of your pan. Then immediately lay on the parchment paper, followed by the cake pan to evenly spread out the batter into a super thin layer. I use my hand to press down the cake pan. It really doesn't get that hot at all, and if you don't leave it on there for too long, there's no way you're gonna get burned. But if you find that it gets a little uncomfortable, you can use a mug to do the pressing motion so your hand never has to get in contact with the heat. As soon as the batter is pressed out, set a timer for 1 minute. I find that that's kind of the perfect sweet spot for the batter to be cooked enough that it will hold its shape, but not so much so that it's dried out and it'll crunch up and break when you try to roll it. But every stovetop is different, so you might have to tweak that time just a little bit. You can peel off the paper at the 30-second mark. That's pretty much when the batter is completely pulled away from the paper, but you can also leave it up until the very end. And And with the rolling, you want to do it immediately because as soon as the egg roll starts to cool down, it's going to have more of a likelihood to crack, and you want to have that perfect smooth roll. Let this cool completely before sliding the egg roll off of the handle, and it should be able to hold its shape like this. If it doesn't, that means you need to cook your batter for longer. It'll still be kind of soft and not at all crunchy at this point, but just put it on the baking tray because we are going to bake this later on to fully dry it out. Let's see it one more time from the top. Scoop on your batter, put down the parchment paper, and spread out the batter using a cake pan. Cook this on low heat for 1 minute, and you can see the batter pulling away from the parchment paper during this time. When everything is an even pale color, that means the batter has fully cooked. Transfer this immediately onto your work surface where you're going to roll up the egg roll as tightly as possible. Let this cool completely with the edge of the egg roll on the bottom. Then you can carefully slide it off of the handle or the mold that you're using and place it onto a baking tray. If you want to make this yourself, be sure to grab the full recipe from my website, jasmafusioncuisine.com, with all the steps written out as well as photo references. The link is in my description box. This recipe makes 25 egg rolls with 5 of each different flavor, and I made 5 flavors total. Doing all of this may seem a little intimidating, but I promise you it's not difficult. It's just really precise, and there's a lot of control involved. So here are some key points to success to keep in mind. Since the batter is so thin on the stove, you want to cook it low and slow. If it comes down to it, it is better to undercook the batter rather than overcooking it. This way at least you'll still be able to roll it up. The thinner the batter is pressed out on the pan, the flakier the final egg roll will be. And the egg roll will harden as it cools down, so be sure to work as fast as you can while it's still warm and malleable. Since this whole process takes a little time, if you find that your batter is drying out, make sure you thin it out with milk so that it's still easy to spread. It'll take a bit of practice, but just be patient with it. And remember, even if it doesn't look good, it will still taste good. Now the egg rolls are all shaped, however it has not reached the desired crunch factor that an egg roll is supposed to have. So we're gonna bake this at 225 degrees Fahrenheit for roughly 20 minutes, and baking it at such a low temperature is just going to dry it out really gently, and that's what's going to achieve that final texture. Keep an eye on it because every oven is different, so you might have to rotate the pan to ensure everything browns evenly. And there you have your beautiful, delicate, homemade egg rolls in 5 different flavors. Let these cool completely for it to reach its final crisp and crunchy texture. It'll be really flaky, and you want to store them in an airtight container so they don't end up becoming stale out in the open. Check out my other Lunar New Year recipes if you're interested, and thank you so much for watching.